Welcome to the Big Change the Film interview series. My name is Jason Cohen. I personally have lost over 120 pounds, and every week I chat with people who've also lost significant amounts of weight, hear their stories, and pass along some of that inspiration to others. Including today's guest and myself, the total pounds lost is now up to 9,831 pounds. This week's guest is Jeff Meyer, who lives in South Florida. Jeff gained 40 pounds after having an injury and told me that he decided that a life overhaul was in order. He was motivated by wanting to keep up with his 8-year-old kid who seemed to have abounding energy. One thing Jeff told me that I love was this: you don't have to accept your fate when you get older. You can do something about it. You can change. Jeff has done that. He's become a runner. We have a fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for watching. I'm here with Jeff Meyer. We got connected. Actually, he reached out to us through Instagram. And first off, maybe, Jeff, we could just start off with a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this. I'm happy to share my story and just to talk about some of the things I've done and I've gone through. But I grew up in pretty much South Florida most of my life. I've been down here in this humidity for probably longer than I want to be, but I've become used to the heat, if that's possible.
Yeah, so how many pounds you've lost some weight? How many pounds have you lost so far?
I'm thinking now somewhere in the neighborhood of 40, 42. I'm not 100% sure. I was at my heaviest, I would say probably between 195 and 200. I mean, it may not sound like a lot for me, but I would say I'm kind of more of the ectomorphic body frame. And, so I think I'm down to now about 157.
And then, did you add that weight on later in life, or did you grow up a little bit overweight? Like, how did that kind of develop?
No, I was somewhat active as a kid. I had some issues with allergies and asthma when I was growing up. So I was involved in some sports, and I was pretty thin up into, I would say, my mid 40s is when I started having problems. I had a issue with a pinched nerve that oddly enough, I woke up one day and I was in severe pain, and I didn't know what to do about it. It was the strangest thing I think I've ever experienced, and I was in so much pain that I wasn't able to actually even sleep at that point. It was difficult to do any type of work. It was difficult just to sit in a chair. And I went to some specialists, and I had X-rays, and they said there's not much we can do for you. We can give you some pain medication. So I tried some of that. It got to a point where I couldn't continue with the pain medication. I wasn't able to get anything done whatsoever. I mean, the pain was kind of radiating all throughout my body. It was, you hear about this pins and needles type situation. It was similar to that, where you have that sensitivity, you have that numbness all throughout your body, and it would change from one day to the next. So it really was one of those situations where it really, it humbled me to the point where that was one of the first times ever I think I experienced something that just was not going away. So, eventually I was able to get some kind of therapy. I went to see a chiropractor that helped me out and was able to work on me a little bit. And, over time, the pinched nerve went away. But after that, I was afraid to do anything. So I would say pretty much for an entire year, I was afraid to do any type of exercise whatsoever. And that's where I kind of packed on the pounds. That's where I gained the weight.
And did your eating habits change during that time? Like, as you were less active, did you eat differently, or was there no exercise offset, or, what kind of happened with that?
Yeah, at that point, I wasn't doing any exercise. Before that, I would be one of those people. I would go to the gym once a week, and I'd walk on the treadmill, or I would lift a few weights and try to see what the other people were doing. I tried getting a trainer at one point a few years ago, before this, and it was okay for a month or so. I just didn't sustain it. And then I kind of fell back into the routine of the weekly workout just to get it in. So I didn't know really what I was doing that much at that point, obviously, as far as working out. And it just wasn't something. It was on my radar, and I thought I was doing something healthy, but my diet itself was I was the turkey sandwich guy. I thought I was eating healthy. I did cut out red meat probably about 12 years ago, but I was eating everything else possible. So it was chips, it was French fries, it was the sandwiches. I thought I was eating lean. I thought I was being healthy, but I never, the weight wouldn't really go down. And around that same, around that same time too, I started when I would wake up in the morning. I was really, I had I had the, problem with my joints. Everything was hurting, and I thought it was just a matter of getting older, getting to the point where I was middle aged. That's what you're supposed. That's what happens to you when you get to middle age. I just thought, well, look, I made it through this far, but when I hit 44, 45, this is it. That's that was my reality at that point.
And then how long did it actually take for you to put on kind of that extra weight and get to, your highest?
It wasn't that long. It was, I would say, a period of about a year, a little less than a year.
Okay. And then what was going on internally? I know you said you kind of tried to hire a trainer, but what was happening at that point that began to turn things around for you?
Well, my wife had talked to me about something she was interested in doing. It was a mud run, an obstacle course run. At that time, they started popping up all over the place. And I was like, I was thinking to myself, well, she's going to do it. If she's going to do it, this is something that I have to do. I want to do something. I'm not getting any younger, obviously, and I have a son. He's 11 right now. He's 11 at this point, but he was a few years older, and I mean younger, and I was thinking to myself, I just don't want to be one of those dads that are just, I don't want to use this sideline, comment, but I definitely just did. I wanted to be able to, keep up with him, whatever he was doing. I didn't know if if he was playing sports or whatever he was doing. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be there for him, years later, even into his 20s. So this kind of motivated me to start like a training routine. So she had a trainer that she was working with, and I talked to the guy, and I ended up, training and working out with her a little bit. So, I got really motivated to do that. And, some of the weight was coming off. I just wasn't dropping that much. And I still had issues with my energy. My energy output was pretty low at that point still. So I was wondering, what can I do? What can I do differently? What's out there? And one of the things that happened was I saw a documentary with Dean Karnazes, the ultra runner, a few years back, and I was like, what is this guy doing? He's doing these crazy runs where he's running 50 miles, 100 miles. It's insane distances. How can he do that? How is that possible? So I started looking online, and I came across something. I was like, what is this Finding Ultra? So, I picked up, the Rich Roll's book, the Finding Ultra book, and I was like, this must be about ultra marathons. This is something that I can read about and learn about. And to my actual surprise, it was really less about ultra marathons than more about changing your diet and changing your lifestyle. Using plants as your fuel source. And that's something that, at first I was like, this doesn't sound like something that would work. I mean, my own wife was a vegetarian for years, and she had given it up at that point. I was like, there's no way that I can do this. It just seems impossible. So I decided to kind of, deep dive into it. And that's when I started looking at forks over knives. And I looked at Brendan Brazier, a number of the different books that are out there. the Thrive series, and I just started sinking in. I just started looking for every bit of information I could about being plant based, and I mean the term plant based resonated with me. I mean, I had friends in the past that were vegans, and I knew people, and it didn't seem like something that I was. It wasn't something that I was interested in doing. But the way that it was described as plant based, that was a whole nother definition for me. And that was something that I found to be a different take on it. These were people that were doing amazing things, amazing athletes. That were they were actually thriving, on plants, and I found that to be amazing.
And at the time, I know, and you wrote to me in a message, that you wanted to be able to keep up with your 8-year-old son, who seemed to be, as you said, tireless. Were you already experiencing issues where you were already, were you seeing like the idea of becoming the sideline parent, or were you already kind of at that place?
To tell you the truth, I think I was already at that place. I have a photo of myself where I'm just kind of sitting there, and I look like I'm in a daze. And I went back and I look, every time I look at that photo, it just reminds me of the lack of energy that I had at that point. I was just, and I just chalk it up to being, that's again, it was one of those things I just chalk up to, I thought was just being old, getting older, that I just wouldn't have any energy or any drive at that point, physically. So, I think it's a reality for a lot of people. They just don't admit it. They just don't do things they're not active anymore. When they can take an opportunity to do so, it's definitely something that people should consider. Really, don't, it's one of the things that, I think about really is that you don't have to accept your fate. As you get older, you can do something about it. Yeah, you can change. I mean, I have the luxury, I guess, of not having an active, career or training as an athlete when I was in high school. I didn't do any sports in high school, so when I do my runs now, everything can be a PR for me. It may sound silly, but it's one of those things where everything is, I can move forward. Everything is a possibility at this point. I don't have that, time where I reflect back where, I'll never be that fast again. Even if it's not really that fast altogether at this point, at least it's a record for me. It's a personal record for me.
That's a great way of looking at it. I know that you said, you kind of alluded to it there, and then also said in a message to me that you realized a life overhaul was in order. So, what did that start to look like as you began to read these things, realize these things? What were your first kind of steps in there?
I made well, I don't know if it's a mistake, but I basically, when I did all the research, I was actually traveling with my wife and my son, and we stopped at one of the toll plazas. And it was around lunchtime. We had to get something to eat. And I told my wife, I said, "This is the last turkey sandwich I'm ever going to eat in my life ever again. I'm changing my diet. I'm changing everything about what I do." That was the first conversation I had with her about it. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I said, "Look, I've done the research on this. I know you were a vegetarian before." And she's like, and she brought up, I have to say this, what about the protein? I know everybody hears this. I said, protein's not going to be a problem. I can get my protein. It won't be an issue. So at first she was like, "You know what? You're going to have to cook all your own meals. I'm not going to make separate meals for myself and, for our son." So I started doing it. I made the mistake though of, I remember going to a grocery store and I was looking around and I went to I was in the frozen food aisle and I looked at the shelves. I'm like, every single product has something that comes from an animal in it. And, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm just trying to, buy like frozen cauliflower, and it had butter in it. So I looked around. And I was like, there wasn't anything in that aisle. And then I remember in the back of my head, I was like, you're a dummy. Go to the vegetable, go to the produce aisle. That's where you're going to find your food, not the not the frozen. I wasn't much of a cook when I started. And I'm not that great of a cook at the moment, but I'm much better than I was before. So I started, buying recipe books. I started looking at the possibility of actually creating dishes. And after, a couple of months, I actually was able to create some decent food, I think. I know it's somewhat decent because my wife was eating it. That's the only way that I know that the food was okay. So the thing about her is she eventually decided to adopt, the same diet as myself. So, she came on board. It was a couple months later, but she now is completely on board with the entire plant-based eating approach. So the thing that I tell people sometimes is, and I think this with any type of diet or any type of change, and I don't want to call it diet really anymore at this point, but it's definitely a lifestyle. That when you're looking, for instance, at a recipe book, you have to go with something simplistic. You're going to get paralyzed by recipes, and that's what happened to me initially, where I was like, I need to make a new recipe every day, and it just became to the point where I wasn't able to do it. I was just so frustrated. I'm like, I just can't do this. This takes too much time out of my day. So I started to get to a point where I found a routine. I found these go-to dishes that I like. I started making a lot of bowl-based dishes. So I throw in some quinoa. I throw in some beans and some kale. I add a little bit of sauce. And then I would mix it up the next day. I would do, tempeh and then with brown rice instead of the, quinoa. Whatever it was, I just started making different dishes with, some of the same ingredients, but I would mix it up every couple of days to the point where I don't look at the recipe books as much anymore. Not that I don't like the different recipes. It's just I've become comfortable with this approach at this point. And that's something I think that for a lot of people, even the people I talk to, some of my friends that have decided to go plant-based, that they ask me, what do you do? What do you eat? I'm like, just start with the basics. I mean, it's as simple, obviously, as just rice and beans. Yeah, I mean, you can go that route.
I'm thinking, you're the turkey sandwich a day guy, and you go from that to your wife telling you like, "Hey, you got to take care of your own meals." What kept you motivated during those, first days, weeks, months when you were kind of responsible for this new world that you had kind of put yourself in?
Well, one of the things I decided to do when I made the switch, I see like I decided to basically flip it completely, the switch. So I wasn't going to just cut out dairy, and start that way. I wanted to flip it completely so that I can really see what the plants could do. I didn't want anything that would make it I didn't want it to do it 50% of the way. I wanted to make sure that from what I read and what I researched at that point was I needed to go full bore with this, and that kept me kind of motivated to do this because when I did see what people were capable of doing, and that I knew that I had to go 100% with this thing, and that was one of the motivational factors. And and frankly, at that point, some of the weights started coming off. So I mean, if I didn't have people out there, like a Josh Lajani or Rich Roll, you know a Fraser Bailey or any of these guys that are out there, Tim, any of these guys that are out there, that if they weren't doing their thing and talking about it, I wouldn't feel comfortable in doing this. I think they certainly have paved the way, and they made it accessible for me to even consider it. So I knew that I could push forward, and I can work as hard as I could to stick with it. I wasn't going to let any setbacks stop me. I mean, early on, I decided, I remember the first couple of weeks, I think it was 2 weeks in, I was kind of fatigued a little bit. I was wondering what was going on, and I realized I'm just not getting enough calories in. I just wasn't eating enough. It's one thing again to eat a turkey sandwich, another thing to eat like a giant bowl of salad. So I learned, that I can't. If I eat out, I couldn't go to, your local restaurant and get a side salad. That wasn't going to work. I'm like, bring me 5 side salads, please. And I sort of adopted this. It seems silly, but I carry this around with, call it like my emergency can of beans. So I have a can that I often carry with me of chickpeas. It's probably my favorite beans to eat. And I do. I have one of those pull tabs, on the can. So anywhere I go, I know if I go out to eat someplace that I can basically just drop that can of beans on a salad and I'm good to go. It actually it's amazing to me how many places just don't have beans, on the menu. So that was a challenge, eating out at first. But you learn what to do, what to eat, and then you bring things with you. You bring a bag of nuts, or you have things that you can take with you just in case there's a situation like that where you can't find something to eat.
I think preparation's key. That's what I don't know about for you, but for my wife and I, Sundays kind of became our prep days where we'd cut carrots, cut cucumbers, make breakfast bars, make date rolls, just make a huge pot of rice and or quinoa or spaghetti sauce or whatever. And it was just like, okay, worst comes to worst, like I've got something. But I love the just the emergency can of beans. How did you begin to feel? So it sounds like initially you felt a little weak, but I know that a big part of it was you weren't feeling like you had a particularly a large amount of energy and felt like maybe that was just you were getting older and whatnot. So once you started getting further into it, started kind of dialing in diet and some of those other things, how did that begin to affect the way that your energy level was?
It was actually, I was very surprised, quite honestly. It was a situation where I realized that I can operate with a little less, much less sleep actually than I was used to. And it was also a matter of, I was doing things. I was motivated to work out. I was motivated to, and my workout of choice, if I didn't allude to it right already, was running. Is running. So, I got motivated to continue with that, and having that energy just propelled me through the day. Usually, I would have a crash, probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I wasn't even a coffee drinker at that point. I think when I lived in Miami for a period of time, and I think I had way too many I think cafe con leches, which is like espresso with milk, years ago, and so I was over coffee, but I just would my energy would sink in the afternoon. But I wasn't when I switched, to being plant based. I wasn't having that problem, and again the weight was coming off, slowly but surely. And in fact, I wasn't even paying attention to it at that point. I felt so good. I wasn't even as much concerned about, the gut at that point. I was just trying to do my thing because for me, it wasn't just about. I know for a lot of people it is. For me, it just happened to be. It wasn't just about weight. It was about feeling better. And weight was secondary in a certain sense.
And how long did
So
it take? I know you said feeling better was a huge motivator for you. Looking back, how long did that take to kind of take effect, to change to where you were feeling better?
I think it was probably a period of about 3 months when things started really gelling at that point. That's where I just started feeling like I was in the groove, that I could make it work. And I think it's 3 or 4 months in, I had a blood draw done just to, check like the cholesterol levels and everything else. And my cholesterol had gone down. I didn't have a high cholesterol to begin with, but it started dropping. I think at that point it was, 15 points or something like that, 10, 15 points, overall, my overall cholesterol level. And I had my cholesterol checked about a year ago, and it dropped a bit more. So, quite a bit more actually at that point. I think I got it down to about 135. So, everything seemed to be going well. I was even at that point, I hadn't yet seen any type of physician. I hadn't been to a doctor for any kind of a general checkup for a number of years at that point, other than the issue that I had with my pinched nerve. So, I just thought everything was fine. I decided to go to a doctor, like I said, about a year ago, just to make sure everything was good. In fact, at that point, he said the B12 levels. I know a lot of people are concerned about B12 levels, and he said they were actually higher than normal. They weren't abnormal, but they were fine. So, the one thing he had to say was something about my vitamin D levels, and so it was slightly lower. I was like, I need to get in the sun more, obviously being in Florida, but it wasn't anything, out of the, range of, normalcy at that point. But.
And then, I know you mentioned your wife initially wasn't on board. I know sometimes for people that can be a bit of a challenge or a struggle. How did that evolve to the point to where she, became on board, became more open to it, and maybe, how has that changed the home dynamic or the family dynamic now?
Well, she could see the weight loss. She saw that I was really interested in working out and I was motivated to do things. I didn't, like I said, I wasn't as fatigued as I usually was, in the evening. And that was something that, I think affected our relationship a little bit. Just being, I come home from work and I was exhausted at that point. And I'm not even, I don't have a physical job, but I just was at that point. I wasn't, I still wasn't feeling that great. So I think she saw that, and she was eating my food. So that was one of the motivational factors for sure. She realized that I could cook things, and she, especially some of the dishes, it becomes super easy too when you do some of the raw foods. You just throw these things together, and there's no cooking involved. So that was an option too for some of the meals.
And then, obviously, running has a big part of your life now. When did running kind of enter the equation for you, and how did that develop?
Well, after I did the first obstacle course race, which was my first run, it was if I remember correctly, it was the distance of about a 10K, and I remember when I did that initially, I was like, there's no way that I can do this distance ever. I mean, I had never done a 5K or anything like that. It's like, this is going to be impossible to do. I survived it somehow, and I felt good afterward. So I was like, I like this. I like these obstacle course races. I'm going to do a few more of them. And I did. I ended up doing, I think, 4 or 5 more of the obstacle course races. And then I realized they're kind of dangerous a little bit. And, you can fall off these 20-foot. I remember one time doing a race in Miami, and it was a 25-foot A-frame, made out of wood. And it was pouring rain. And I was the only, at that point, at that juncture in the race, I was the only person on that obstacle. And there was somebody that was the attendant, from the race, committee that was there. And I asked the guy, should I climb this now? It's pouring down rain, like a monsoon almost. He's like, well, you can, or you can do burpees. I'm like, I'm going to do this. So I climbed that up, and then I was able to scale it and come down without falling. And I realized, you know what? I'm going to cut out some of these obstacle course races. I think I'll just focus on the running part. So that's when I decided to do my first, half marathon, which happened to be on the trail. And that was a great experience. Although I think I got to mile 12, and then my knee gave out. And I had to kind of hobble the last, mile, 1 mile, 1.1, miles at that point. But I finished, and it didn't deter me. I decided to, work harder and try to, stop that from happening, obviously, with my any other races moving forward. But I was still motivated. The thing about running, I find that it's I'm certainly, it's one of those things that can humble you. And during this whole experience, of changing my diet and getting, regaining some fitness, it just, finding some humility is something that I've found to be, a great experience, quite honestly, because running is definitely one of those sports that can humble you. I remember the second race that I did was a half marathon on the road. I remember, and I thought I was doing pretty well. My goal was to do like a 2 hour marathon. I mean, half marathon at that point. And I remember halfway through the race, I was chugging along, and it was extremely hot, and I was kind of out of breath, and my heart rate was jacked up at that point. And at some point during the race, this guy passes me pushing a stroller. And I was like, oh, this really, now I can see what's happening here. He comfortably passes me during the stroller, and I was like, I need to work harder, obviously. But again, it didn't deter me, and I did finish that race. I mean, I stopped probably 3 or 4 times, but I think I finished at that race 2 hours and 2 minutes. So I didn't quite make my my 2 hour window, but time. But I did finish the race, and I've been running ever since. One of the things that has been amazing, I think, for me, especially trail running, is finding a group to run with. And the group that I run with, we call them the DTR, the Down to Run Tribe. And it's a great group of people, and they've been super motivational in helping me. And running with them, they're my accountability factor. They're the people that really motivate me to keep it going and to keep running and to sign up with new races. And signing up for a new race, whatever it is, it's just one of those things that always motivates me to keep going and to train harder. Even if I'm injured, and I've been injured a few times, but every time that I get injured, I know typically that I can get past that injury. It will heal eventually. A lot of people, I've heard from a lot of people, where they say, "Look, I don't run because it hurts." And one of the things that I've realized is you do have to push beyond that comfort barrier. Do something that's uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable at first, and I think with running, it never gets easy, but it's something that you can work at, and work hard at, and you can see the benefits of it, and you can get better, no matter what pace you're at. I had a friend, and she posted something on Facebook the other day, and she told me, she said, "I saw something online that says you're not a runner if you have to walk part of the time." And I looked at it, and I looked at the comment, and I posted something back, and I said, "That's crazy. That's insane. And I put, my comment was, you're a runner if at some point you're moving faster than you can walk." So, I had the great fortune of meeting Jeff Galloway, who's I don't know if you've heard that name before, but he invented the sort of walk run concept. He's a big believer in that you can start out running and then walk. So you could run for basically 2 minutes and then walk for 30 seconds. So an interval based, run, and then start running again. So he's been teaching that all around the U.S. for a number of years. I think he's in his, I don't want to date him, but I think he's in his 70s now, and he's done probably 100 plus marathons at this point. And he said you can do like a 3 hour, 3:30 marathon walking and running. So it's when I tell people is anybody can run, they just have to work at it. Even someone like myself, who I always thought that I had a bad knee, and I chalk it up to an unfortunate stage diving accident in the mid '90s. But it's something that I worked at, and I did a little bit of self massage on my knee, and and I went to a physical therapist to kind of grind out my knee. And even for me, running was something that at first it was very hard. It was difficult. I couldn't run more than a block without stopping, and I didn't know what I was doing at first. I was landing on my heel, and I had all this shin pain. I was like, "What am I doing wrong? Maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should try landing on the front of my foot." So I started doing that. And I was like, I don't know if this is right or this is you're supposed to do this or what you're supposed to do. So at that point too, I started reading. I found this, the book Born to Run. I was like, oh, these people have it figured out. They're running barefoot. I tried that. It wasn't for me, but I tried to adopt a kind of more minimal shoe. What I found anyway was that I can change my running form and I can run. I can start doing this on a regular basis, which was great.
And what about this journey, if anything, whether it's the running part or the food or, whatever it might be, what has surprised you about this that, 4 years ago or so you wouldn't have expected?
That I become passionate about something. That I would, look at something that most people probably would consider just a diet change. And it would invigorate me. It would change the direction probably of my life. That was something that I never anticipated whatsoever. That I would meet some amazing people, and, all along the way. That's something that really amazed me. And, and it motivated me to try to help or give back in any way that I can. When I see people, making little changes in their diet and starting a fitness routine, if I can help in any way whatsoever, that's something that really, makes me happy and drives me, at this point. I know that I'm not going to, break any records at this point with my runs or my fitness. But I know that, just doing what I'm doing, and if I'm just posting something on social media or, whatever it is that I'm doing, or just talking to somebody about some of the changes I made, maybe they'll take a shred of that and change something in their own life. And in some cases that's happened. So, I'm grateful for that for sure.
That's awesome. And what would you say to somebody who's at the beginning of this journey, who's trying to find their way, and maybe they're at that point they're not really passionate about anything. They maybe don't have a ton of energy and don't maybe feel a ton of motivation, but your story is resonating with them. What would you tell them?
Well, take it from this regular kind of middle-aged guy. I think I was 45 at the time, or 44, 45 when I made the change. 45, made my change. That you can alter the direction of your life. You can make changes, and and not to give up. And I tell this to people sometimes. Oh, just basically, give plants a chance. You owe it to yourself to kind of make a change. If you've been eating the same way your entire life, the standard, American diet or whatever you want to call it, you owe it to yourself to do something about it. One of the things that I saw, I think it's his name, it's John Lewis. He calls himself the badass vegan. He said something on Rich Roll's podcast one time. It was, it makes no sense to put off making your life better. And that really resonated with me. I'm like, yes, why wait till tomorrow? Don't wait till January 1st to change your direction of your life. Change tomorrow. Start making those changes right away. What are you waiting for? Do something about it. It's your life. I mean, that can change, and hopefully it's not just your life. Maybe it's the people around you that can benefit from it as well.
That's great. And then if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice whenever you were more on the sidelines and life looked a little different, what advice would you give that person?
That's a good one. I would say to kind of take a more of a deeper dive on the direction of my fitness, at that point, and maybe really look at what I was eating just to see if that impacted, the way I was feeling. Especially when you sort of think, at least in my case, that you were doing the right thing, that you're eating quote unquote healthy. you look at, this, what the food groups are, and at that point, you're like, yeah, I just thought I was eating correctly or the right way. But as it turns out, it probably wasn't the best, diet for me at the time. So I think that's what I would tell myself at that point.
And what's the best way for people to connect with you and find out what you're up to?
Probably Instagram is one of the best ways, or Facebook. I call myself the plant slayer or plant slayer. That's something that I've kind of adopted, the moniker, my self-adopted moniker. But and I just say, slaying workouts and slaying plants. I wasn't that good at actually. I don't have a green thumb, so I would probably destroy plants otherwise if I had a garden. But and one of the things I would say just is I don't know if I can say this, but you know, do epic shit. Really, I mean. I have some ultra runner friends that basically, tell me that all the, that's the term they use all the time. So, you know, break out of that mold and go beyond what you think is normal and what's accepted as far as, your fitness routine is.
That's great. Well, Jeff, hopefully I'll catch up with you at some point on a trail somewhere. And
Yeah, looking forward to it.
thanks for the time. Maybe you should come and join us in Leadville next year.
I had actually an invite request to go this year from Jim Gray,
Oh, okay.
and I didn't make it out. But if you guys do it next year, I definitely want to come.
It's not a if.
Yeah,
We'll be there
I'm
for
required.
sure. Yeah. It's a done deal. So I'm starting to invite people early. But again, I appreciate the time and
Oh, thank you. I appreciate what you do. You're for sure.
all right.
Thank you.
Well, have a great one.